What happens when the most feared Italian mafia boss is publicly challenged by a woman who refuses to bow? Reina never meant to provoke a legend. But one sharp sentence, spoken in front of the wrong man at the wrong table, turned her from an invisible restaurant manager into the most talked-about woman in Rome's underworld. Lorenzo Romano was known for silencing enemies with a glance, for ending bloodlines without raising his voice. People who challenged him didn't get warnings. They disappeared. So when Reina looked him in the eye, knife still in hand from plating his meal, and told him he would respect her staff or leave her restaurant, the entire room stopped breathing. Because what she did next wasn't bravery. It was defiance. And what he did next would shock everyone. Reina never imagined her quiet, carefully controlled life in Rome would collide with Lorenzo Romano, the ruthless mafia boss who ruled the city from its darkest corners. To challenge him meant risking everything. To submit to him meant surrendering the one thing she'd built her entire identity on, her dignity. But what happens when power meets integrity, when fear collides with self-respect, and when the most dangerous man in Italy discovers the one woman who refuses to kneel? Hey friend, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to Undiluted Love Stories. It's 1 second for you but a big deal for me. Now, let's continue. The night was alive with the hum of Rome's elite quarter. Warm golden light spilled from centuries-old buildings, painting cobblestone streets in amber and shadow. Inside Bella Notte, an exclusive private dining establishment tucked between designer boutiques and political offices, the air was thick with the scent of truffle risotto, aged wine, and whispered secrets. Reina adjusted the perfectly folded napkin beside a crystal wine glass, her movements precise and practiced. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, elegant yet professional. A fitted black dress and simple gold earrings completed her look, understated authority. She wasn't just the manager. She was the gatekeeper, the standard-bearer, the woman who ensured every detail met perfection. This restaurant didn't serve the public. It served power. Politicians negotiated here. Billionaires celebrated here. And men whose names were never spoken aloud made deals that shaped the city's underworld. Reina had learned quickly, silence was currency, obedience was survival. She glanced across the dining hall, white tablecloths, candlelight flickering against marble walls, conversations held in tones too low to overhear. Everything was running smoothly. Until the atmosphere shifted. The front door opened without announcement. No reservation call. No confirmation from her staff. Just the sudden, suffocating weight of presence. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Silverware paused against porcelain. Heads turned, then quickly looked away. Reina's pulse quickened, but her expression remained neutral. She knew what this meant. Lorenzo Romano had arrived. He didn't walk, he owned every step. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, his black hair slicked back with ruthless precision. His suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, and his presence filled the room like smoke filling a closed chamber. For men flanked him, still, watchful, lethal. But they were shadows. He was the storm. Reina had never seen him in person, but she'd heard the stories. Everyone had. Lorenzo Romano didn't negotiate. He dictated. He didn't forgive. He erased. Entire families vanished if they crossed him. Politicians who opposed him retired early, or didn't retire at all. His empire was built on fear, precision, and absolute control. Her stomach tightened, but she straightened her posture. This was her restaurant. Lorenzo's cold, dark eyes swept the room with casual dominance before landing on the largest corner table, the one reserved for a visiting ambassador. He sat down without asking. His men spread out behind him like sentries. The ambassador's party, already seated nearby, quietly stood and left without a word. Reina's jaw tightened. She grabbed 2 leather-bound menus and crossed the dining hall, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Good evening," she said evenly, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heartbeat. "Welcome to Bella Notte." Lorenzo's gaze lifted slowly. His eyes were obsidian, cold, calculating, capable of stripping someone bare without a single word. He studied her for a long, silent moment. He didn't respond. Instead, he gestured dismissively toward the menus in her hand, as if words were beneath him. Reina set them down carefully. "Our specials tonight include—" "I'll have whatever you think is worth my time," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice low and smooth, yet laced with command. It wasn't a request. It was a test. Reina's fingers tightened slightly against the menu, but her face remained composed. Very well. I'll bring you our best. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, forcing her breath to remain even. Inside, her sous chef looked up nervously. Is that? Yes, Reina said curtly. Prepare the lamb ragu, the burrata antipasto, and the risotto al tartufo. Perfect execution. No mistakes. 20 minutes later, she returned with a beautifully arranged plate, golden saffron risotto, shaved truffles, microgreens, every element placed with artistic precision. Lorenzo didn't thank her. He simply looked down at the plate, then slowly picked up his fork. The entire room watched in silence. He took one bite, then another. His expression revealed nothing, no approval, no displeasure, just cold observation. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he shoved the plate off the table. It crashed to the floor. Porcelain shattered. Risotto splattered across pristine marble. Truffle shavings scattered like ash. Gasps rippled through the room. Lorenzo leaned back, dabbing his lips with his napkin. His voice was poison wrapped in silk. Next time, don't waste my time with mediocrity. Reina froze. Her staff stared in horror. Customers lowered their heads. One of Lorenzo's men smirked. This was how it was supposed to go. You stayed silent. You swallowed the insult. You thanked God you were still breathing. But Reina wasn't built like that. Her hands curled into fists. Heat flushed her cheeks, not from shame, but from fury. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward. Her heels crunched over shattered porcelain. She stopped at the edge of his table, her chin lifted, her dark eyes blazing. Pay for the meal, she said firmly. The room went deathly silent. Lorenzo's head tilted slightly, his obsidian gaze narrowing. What did you say? You heard me. Reina's voice didn't waver. You eat here, you pay. You don't get to destroy my work and walk out like you own the place. One of his men shot to his feet, fury twisting his face. Watch your mouth. Sit. Lorenzo's command cracked through the air like a whip. The man obeyed instantly. Now Lorenzo stood, towering over her. His presence was suffocating, a storm condensed into human form. He leaned in close enough that she could see the faint scar cutting across his jawline, close enough to smell cedar and danger. You've got fire, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. But fire dies when it meets steel. Reina didn't flinch. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. And steel rusts when it meets water. Don't test me, Lorenzo Romano. The use of his full name made the room gasp. For the first time, genuine surprise flickered across his face. His lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close to disbelief. You dare, he whispered. I do. Her gaze didn't waver. She reached for the leather bill folder on the hostess stand, scribbled the total, and placed it firmly on the table between them. That'll be €350. Cash or card? The silence was suffocating. Lorenzo's men stiffened, waiting. Was she insane? Did she want to die tonight? Lorenzo studied her for a long, unbearable moment. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes burned with something new. Not just anger. Not just arrogance. Something else. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. You'll regret this. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. His men followed like shadows. The door closed behind them with a soft click. The moment they were gone, the restaurant erupted in frantic whispers. Is she insane? She spoke to Lorenzo Romano like that? She's going to disappear. Her assistant manager rushed over, hands trembling. Reina, what have you done? Reina bent down and began picking up the shards of broken porcelain, her face calm, though her heart still raced. What I had to, she said simply. But as she dropped the pieces into the trash, she felt it, deep inside her chest, like a knot pulled too tight. Tonight had changed everything. She had challenged a king in his own kingdom. And kings never forget defiance. The morning after would prove just how true that was. The morning after the confrontation, Bella Notte was quieter than usual. Reina arrived before dawn, as she always did, unlocking the heavy wooden doors and stepping into the dimly lit dining hall. The scent of lemon cleaner and faint wine still lingered in the air. Everything looked the same, white tablecloths pressed and ready, silverware polished to a mirror shine, candles waiting to be lit. But something felt different. The silence was heavier, thicker, like the calm before a storm that had already begun. She pushed the feeling aside and moved through her morning routine, checking reservations, reviewing inventory, preparing staff schedules. Her assistant manager, Sophia, arrived an hour later, her face drawn and pale. "Reina," Sophia said carefully, setting her bag down behind the hostess stand. "We need to talk." Reina glanced up from the reservation book. "About what?" Sophia hesitated, then lowered her voice. "3 of our suppliers called this morning. They're canceling their contracts." Reina's pen paused mid-stroke. "Which ones?" "The butcher, the wine distributor, and the seafood vendor." Sophia's hands twisted nervously. "They didn't give reasons. They just said they can't work with us anymore. Effective immediately." A cold knot formed in Reina's stomach, but she kept her expression neutral. "Did they say why?" "No. But Reina." Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Everyone knows what happened last night. Word spreads fast in this city." Reina set the pen down slowly. She'd expected consequences. Men like Lorenzo Romano didn't let defiance go unanswered. But she hadn't expected it to start so soon, or so quietly. "We'll find new suppliers," Reina said firmly. "Make the calls. Start with the vendors in Trastevere." Sophia nodded, but her eyes were filled with doubt. By midday, the situation had worsened. The health inspector arrived unannounced, a sharp-eyed woman with a clipboard and an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind. She moved through the kitchen with clinical precision, examining every surface, every storage area, every corner. "Irregularities," she said curtly, scribbling notes. "Temperature violations in the walk-in cooler. Improper labeling on storage containers. Inadequate ventilation documentation." Reina's chef protested. "We passed inspection 3 months ago with perfect marks." "That was then," the inspector interrupted coldly. "This is now. You're shut down until further notice. Pending review." She slapped a closure notice on the front door and walked out without another word. Reina stood in the empty dining hall, staring at the official red seal plastered across her door. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. She knew exactly what this was. Lorenzo Romano's invisible hand. He hadn't threatened her. Hadn't sent men to vandalize her restaurant or intimidate her staff. He didn't need to. His power operated in whispers, in favors called in pressure applied where it hurt most. This was his message: "I don't need to touch you to ruin you." That evening, Sophia approached her hesitantly. "Reina, I'm sorry, but I can't stay." Reina looked up sharply. "What?" Sophia wouldn't meet her eyes. "My husband, he works in construction. His boss told him this morning that if I keep working here, he'll lose his job. I have 2 kids, Reina. I can't risk it." "Sophia. I'm sorry." Sophia's voice cracked. "I really am." She left her apron on the counter and walked out. By the end of the week, half the staff had quit. Reservations that had been booked months in advance were mysteriously cancelled. Customers who'd been loyal for years suddenly stopped answering calls. And every evening, without fail, a black Mercedes idled across the street from Bella Notte. Engine running. Windows tinted. No one got out. No one approached. It just sat there, watching, waiting. A silent reminder. Reina understood the strategy now. Lorenzo Romano wasn't destroying her with violence. He was suffocating her with pressure, isolating her, waiting for her to break under the weight of her own pride. He expected her to call, to beg, to apologize. But Reina refused. Every morning, she unlocked the doors. Every evening, she locked them again. Even though the kitchen was closed. Even though no customers came. Even though her savings were bleeding dry. She would not bend. Late one night, 2 weeks after the confrontation, Reina stood alone in the empty dining hall. The chandeliers were dark. The tables were bare. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. She'd sent the remaining staff home hours ago. Now it was just her, the silence, and the suffocating weight of everything she was about to lose. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord: "Rent is overdue. Need payment by end of week or I'll have to consider other tenants." Raina closed her eyes, fighting back the burn of tears she refused to shed. She heard the soft click of the front door opening. Her eyes snapped open. She hadn't locked it yet. A figure stepped through the doorway, backlit by the streetlights outside. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate, controlled grace. Lorenzo Romano. He was alone. No guards. No entourage. Just him, dressed in a dark coat, hands visible at his sides. Raina's heart hammered, but she straightened her spine, her chin lifting instinctively. "We're closed," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Lorenzo stopped a few feet away, his obsidian eyes studying her in the dim light. "I can see that." Silence stretched between them, heavy, dangerous, electric. "You should have begged," he said quietly, almost conversationally. "You should have left," Raina replied. Lorenzo's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close to amusement. "Most people scream when they're cornered. Most men like you mistake fear for respect." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, something dangerously close to admiration. He took a slow step closer. "I could own you," he said softly. "Your restaurant. Your reputation. Your entire life. One phone call, and everything you've built disappears." Raina held his gaze, refusing to retreat. "You don't own people, Lorenzo. You break them. There's a difference." The silence that followed was charged, almost tangible. Then Lorenzo did something unexpected. He laughed. A real laugh, low, genuine, and entirely unpracticed. He shook his head slowly, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met," he said quietly, "or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Raina said. Lorenzo studied her for another long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. But before he left, he paused, his hand on the frame. He didn't look back. "This isn't over," he said. And then he was gone. Raina stood alone in the darkness, her heart still racing, her hands trembling now that he'd left. Because she realized something terrifying. Lorenzo Romano wasn't trying to destroy her anymore. He was trying to understand her. And she didn't know which was more dangerous. The morning after Lorenzo's visit, Raina woke to find an unmarked envelope slipped under her apartment door. She stared at it for a long moment before bending down to pick it up. No name. No return address. Just thick, expensive paper sealed with black wax. Inside was a single document, a reinstatement notice from the health department. All violations cleared. Kitchen approved for immediate reopening. No explanation. No signature. Raina's hands tightened around the paper. She knew exactly who was behind this. But why? Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. The suppliers who'd cancelled their contracts called back, apologetic and eager to resume business. The wine distributor offered a discount, as a gesture of goodwill. The butcher personally delivered premium cuts with a nervous smile. None of them would say what changed their minds. Reservations started appearing in the booking system again, high-profile clients, politicians, businessmen who'd vanished 2 weeks ago. They returned as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't abandoned her the moment Lorenzo Romano's shadow touched her restaurant. Sophia returned too, shamefaced and quiet. "My husband's boss called him," she said softly. "Told him there was a misunderstanding. That I could keep working here after all." Raina didn't ask questions. She already knew the answer. Lorenzo Romano was reversing everything he'd done. But he wasn't contacting her. Wasn't making demands. Wasn't asking for anything in return. And that terrified her more than his retaliation ever had. Because it meant he was playing a different game now. One she didn't understand. That evening, Bella Notte was fully operational again. The dining hall hummed with quiet conversation, the kitchen moved with practiced efficiency, and Raina supervised everything with her usual meticulous control. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She moved between tables, checking on guests, ensuring every detail met her standards. As she passed the front windows, she glanced outside, and froze. The black Mercedes was still there. Same spot. Same tinted windows. Engine running. But this time, she understood what it meant. It wasn't a threat. It was a presence. Lorenzo Romano was making sure she knew. He was still paying attention. The pattern continued for weeks. Strange protections appeared where dangers once lived. A drunk customer who'd become aggressive with one of her waitresses was escorted out by two well-dressed men who appeared from nowhere. They didn't hurt him, just removed him quietly and efficiently, then disappeared before Reina could ask questions. A competing restaurant owner who'd been spreading rumors about Bella Notte's criminal connections suddenly closed his establishment and left Rome entirely. An envelope of cash appeared in her office with a note in elegant handwriting, for renovations. No interest. No timeline. Every gift unsigned. Every problem solved before she could voice it aloud. Lorenzo never crossed the threshold of her restaurant again. Never approached her directly. Never made demands. But his presence was everywhere, invisible, deliberate, inescapable. Reina found herself lying awake at night, trying to understand his strategy. Was this manipulation? Control? Or something else entirely? Men like Lorenzo Romano didn't do kindness without purpose. They didn't protect without expecting ownership in return. So what did he want? 3 weeks after his midnight visit, Reina was closing up late when she sensed movement behind her. She turned sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife she kept behind the bar. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, coat open, hands visible. Alone again. No guards. No weapons. You need better locks, he said mildly. Reina's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. You need better manners. This is the second time you've broken into my restaurant. I didn't break in. The door was unlocked. It wasn't. Lorenzo's lips curved slightly. It was when I arrived. They stood in silence, tension crackling between them like static electricity. Why are you here? Reina asked finally. Lorenzo moved further into the room, his footsteps deliberate and measured. He stopped near one of the tables, running his fingers along the back of a chair. I've been thinking about what you said, he began quietly. That I break people instead of owning them. Reina said nothing, watching him carefully. You were right. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. I've spent my entire life taking what I want. Buildings. Businesses. Loyalty. Respect. He paused. People bend because they have no choice. They submit because resistance means destruction. And now? Reina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorenzo took a step closer. Now I've met someone who didn't bend. Who chose resistance even when it meant losing everything. Another step. And I realized something. What? That I've never had to earn anything in my life. His voice dropped, becoming almost vulnerable. Until you. Reina's breath caught. This wasn't the Lorenzo Romano from the stories, the ruthless mafia boss who ruled through fear. This was something else. Something raw and unguarded. You're fixing my problems, Reina said carefully. Protecting me. Clearing obstacles from my path. Without asking. Without demanding anything in return. Yes. Why? Lorenzo stopped just a few feet away. Close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw. Close enough to see the man beneath the monster. Because you're the first person who ever looked at me and saw something other than power to fear or use, he said quietly. You saw a man who needed to be held accountable. Who needed to earn respect instead of demand it. Reina's hands trembled. Lorenzo. I'm not asking you to trust me, he interrupted. I know I don't deserve that. But I am asking you to let me prove that I can be more than what everyone believes I am. By controlling my life from the shadows? Reina challenged. By solving my problems before I even know they exist? No. Lorenzo shook his head slowly. By showing you that I can choose restraint. That I can protect without possessing. That I can, he paused, as if the words were difficult. That I can care about someone's well-being more than my own pride. Reina stared at him, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. That Lorenzo Romano was a man who destroyed everything he touched. That getting close to him meant risking not just her business, but her life. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity. And against all logic, fascination. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. Lorenzo's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. "Permission," he said simply. "To be in your life. Not as a threat. Not as a master. Just as a man who wants to know the woman brave enough to challenge him." Reina's throat tightened. "And if I say no? Then I walk away." His voice was steady, certain. "The protections stay. The help continues. But I disappear from your life completely. No pressure. No retaliation. Just gone." The weight of his words settled between them. This was the power shift she'd been sensing. Lorenzo Romano, the man who'd never been denied anything, was offering her complete control. He was putting his pride, his obsession, his entire sense of self-worth in her hands. "I don't know if I can trust you," Reina admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," Lorenzo said. "That's why I'm asking for time. Not ownership. Not promises. Just the chance to prove that the man standing in front of you right now can be different from the legend you've heard about." Reina's mind warred with her heart. Every logical thought told her to refuse. To send him away. To protect herself from the inevitable destruction that came with men like him. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see the monster Rome feared. She saw a man who'd never had to fight for anything, until he'd met someone who refused to be claimed. "One chance," Reina said finally. "You get one chance to prove you're more than your reputation. But the moment you try to control me, the moment you cross a line." "You'll tell me to leave," Lorenzo finished. "And I will. Without retaliation?" "Without retaliation." Reina studied him for a long moment, searching for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another game. But all she saw was raw, desperate honesty. "Okay," she whispered. Lorenzo's expression shifted, relief mixed with something that looked almost like wonder. As if he couldn't quite believe she'd said yes. "Thank you," he said quietly. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Reina." "Yes." "The black car across the street, I'll have it removed tomorrow." "Good," Reina said. It was starting to hurt business. Lorenzo smiled, a real smile, genuine and unguarded. "Wouldn't want that." And then he was gone. Reina stood alone in the empty restaurant, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She had just agreed to let Lorenzo Romano into her life. And she had absolutely no idea what that would mean. 3 days passed before Reina heard from Lorenzo again. She'd half expected him to show up the next morning, eager, impatient, demanding her time the way powerful men always did. But he didn't. The black Mercedes disappeared from across the street, just as he'd promised. No letters appeared. No calls came. No problems were mysteriously solved. It was as if he'd vanished completely. Reina told herself she was relieved. That the silence meant safety. That distance from Lorenzo Romano was exactly what she needed. But late at night, when the restaurant was closed and she was alone with her thoughts, she found herself wondering where he was. What he was doing. Whether he'd changed his mind. Whether she'd actually wanted him to. On the 4th day, a delivery arrived. Not an envelope this time, but a small wooden box, elegant and simple. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a single-key old ornate, made of brass that had aged to a deep golden patina. Beneath it, a note in the same elegant handwriting she'd seen before. "Tonight. 8 p.m. The address will find you when you're ready." No signature. No explanation. Just those cryptic words. Reina held the key up to the light, turning it slowly. It looked antique, possibly centuries old. The kind of key that opened something important. Something hidden. She should throw it away. Should ignore the invitation entirely. Instead, she found herself slipping it into her pocket. At 7:45 p.m., after ensuring Bella Notte was running smoothly under Sophia's supervision, Reina stood outside her restaurant holding the key. The moment she wrapped her fingers around it, her phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number, via Della Lungera 10. "Top floor. The door will be open." Reina's heart hammered. She recognized the street, an exclusive area overlooking the Tiber, where Rome's oldest families kept their private residences. Properties that never appeared on the market. Buildings that held centuries of secrets. She could still turn back. Could text a refusal. Could return to her safe, controlled life and forget Lorenzo Romano existed. But even as the thought formed, she was already hailing a cab. The building was exactly as she'd imagined, ancient stone facade, weathered by time but meticulously maintained. Ivy climbed the walls in controlled patterns. A discreet entrance led to a private elevator, its brass doors polished to a mirror shine. Reina stepped inside. The elevator rose silently, carrying her higher and higher until it opened directly into a penthouse apartment. She stepped out into a space that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Tiber River, the water reflecting the lights of Rome like scattered diamonds. The apartment was elegant but sparse, no excess, no ostentation. Just clean lines, carefully chosen furniture, and an overwhelming sense of controlled order. This was Lorenzo's private world. And it was nothing like she'd expected. No weapons on display. No guards stationed at doors. No evidence of the violence and chaos she knew he commanded elsewhere. Just wine, soft lighting, and a man stripped of his armor. Lorenzo stood near the windows, his back to her. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. No jacket. No tie. More vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. He turned slowly when he heard her footsteps. "You came," he said quietly, and she heard genuine surprise in his voice. "You invited me," Reina replied, moving further into the room. "Though I'm still not sure why." Lorenzo gestured toward a small table set for two near the windows. Simple white plates, crystal glasses, a single candle burning between them. "Because I wanted to talk," he said. "Really talk. Away from your restaurant. Away from my world. Just two people having a conversation." Reina studied him carefully. "And if I'd said no? Then I would have respected that." Lorenzo pulled out a chair for her. "The choice was always yours." Reina hesitated, then sat down. Lorenzo moved to the opposite chair, his movements deliberate and respectful, maintaining distance, giving her space. Wine was already poured. Simple pasta sat on the plates, cacio e pepe, made perfectly. The kind of food that required skill but not showmanship. "Did you make this?" Reina asked, surprised. "I did." Lorenzo picked up his fork. "I know how to cook." "Most people don't believe that." "Most people don't know anything real about you," Reina observed. "No," Lorenzo agreed quietly. "They don't." They ate in silence for a few moments. The food was excellent, simple, honest, made with care. It reminded Reina of the meals her grandmother used to make. "Why did you invite me here, Lorenzo?" Reina asked finally, setting down her fork. "What do you really want?" Lorenzo put down his own fork and leaned back slightly. For a long moment, he just looked at her, not with the predatory intensity she'd seen at their first meeting, but with something softer. Something searching. "Do you know what it's like," he began slowly, "to have everyone in your life either fear you or want something from you? To never have a single conversation that isn't about power, or control, or survival?" Reina said nothing, just watched him. "I've built an empire on fear," Lorenzo continued. "On the certainty that I'm untouchable. That I never apologize, never retreat, never show weakness." He paused. "And then you happened." "I challenged you," Reina said. "That's all." "No." Lorenzo shook his head. "You did something far more dangerous than that. You looked at me, at the most feared man in Rome, and you didn't see power to use or fear to submit to. You saw a man who was being disrespectful. And you held him accountable." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Do you understand how rare that is? How terrifying and exhilarating it is to meet someone who sees past the monster to the man underneath?" Reina's throat tightened. "Lorenzo." "You humiliated me," he interrupted, but there was no anger in his voice. "In front of men who would die for my approval. In front of people who've spent their lives learning never to cross me. And instead of wanting you dead." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I wanted to know who you were. What made you different? Why you didn't bend when everyone else breaks. And now? Reina asked quietly. Lorenzo met her eyes directly. Now I know the answer. Which is? You didn't challenge me because you're reckless, he said. You challenged me because you believe power should answer to integrity. Because you think respect is earned, not demanded. Because you refuse to trade your dignity for safety. Reina felt her heart hammering. Every word he spoke felt like he was peeling back layers she didn't even know she had. You see the world the way it should be, Lorenzo continued. Not the way it is. And that makes you either incredibly brave or impossibly naive. Maybe both, Reina said, echoing the words she'd spoken before. Lorenzo smiled, genuine, unguarded. Maybe both. He stood slowly and moved to the windows, looking out over the city lights. Reina watched him, this powerful man suddenly looking almost lonely. I've taken everything I've ever wanted, Lorenzo said quietly. Buildings. Businesses. Loyalty. I've destroyed anyone who stood in my way. I've built a kingdom on blood and fear and absolute control. He turned to face her. And the world has never denied me anything, until you. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. What do you want from me, Lorenzo? Reina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorenzo crossed the room slowly, stopping just in front of her chair. He didn't reach for her, didn't invade her space. Just stood there, looking down at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Vulnerability. I want to earn the right to be in your life, he said simply. Not as the Mafia boss everyone fears. Not as the man who controls half of Rome. Just as Lorenzo. A man who wants to know the woman who refused to bow. Reina's hands trembled slightly. You're asking for something you've never had to ask for before. I know. You're putting yourself in a position of vulnerability. I know. You could lose. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. I know. And that's exactly why I'm asking. Reina stood slowly, bringing herself face to face with him. She could see the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty in his eyes, things she was certain no one else had ever witnessed. I need you to understand something, Reina said carefully. I won't be your redemption arc. I won't be the woman who fixes the broken Mafia boss. And I absolutely won't be your exception, the one person you treat differently while continuing to be a monster to everyone else. Lorenzo absorbed her words without flinching. What will you be then? A mirror, Reina said. Someone who reflects back to you who you actually are, not who you've convinced yourself you need to be. Someone who will call you out when you're wrong. Someone who won't let you hide behind power and fear. That sounds uncomfortable, Lorenzo said quietly. It will be, Reina agreed. For both of us. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, he took a step back, giving her space, showing her through action that he understood boundaries. I accept your terms, he said. Just like that. Just like that. Lorenzo's voice was steady, certain. Because you're offering me something I've never had, the chance to be accountable to someone who won't let me manipulate or intimidate them. The chance to be better than my reputation. Reina felt something shift inside her, not trust, not yet, but the beginning of possibility. This won't be easy, she warned. I don't know how to be close to someone like you without losing myself. Then we'll figure it out together, Lorenzo said. With boundaries. With honesty. With you maintaining complete control over how close I'm allowed to get. He held out his hand, not to pull her toward him, but as an offering. A choice. Reina looked at his hand for a long moment. This was the point of no return. Once she took it, once she allowed Lorenzo Romano into her life, everything would change. But maybe that wasn't entirely bad. Maybe change was exactly what both of them needed. Slowly, carefully, Reina placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, gentle, respectful. Thank you, Lorenzo said quietly. For giving me a chance I don't deserve. You're right, Reina said. You don't deserve it. So don't waste it. Lorenzo smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes and softened his entire face. I won't. They stood there for a moment, hands joined, the city of Rome spreading out beneath them like a tapestry of light and shadow. And for the first time since they'd met, Reina didn't feel afraid. She felt powerful. Because Lorenzo Romano, the man who'd never been denied anything, had just placed all his power in her hands. And they both knew she would never hesitate to use it. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Lorenzo Romano began appearing in Reina's life, not as a shadow, not as a silent protector, but as a presence she slowly, carefully allowed closer. He came to Bella Notte 3 times a week, always at the same table near the window. Always alone. He'd order simple meals, eat quietly, and leave a generous tip without fanfare. He never demanded her attention, never pulled her away from her work, never made a scene. But he was there. Consistent. Patient. Waiting. Between visits, they texted. Conversations that started cautiously, comments about food, questions about her day, and gradually deepened into something more substantial. Philosophy. History. The nature of power and integrity. Debates that stretched late into the night, neither of them willing to concede ground. Reina found herself looking forward to their exchanges. Found herself crafting responses more carefully. Found herself wondering what he'd say about things that happened during her day. And that terrified her almost as much as it intrigued her. Because she was starting to see him differently. Not as Lorenzo Romano, the Mafia king. But as Lorenzo, a man who read classical literature, who cooked with surprising skill, who asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to her answers. A man who was choosing to be vulnerable in ways she suspected he'd never allowed before. But Rome was watching. Whispers spread through the city's underworld like wildfire. Lorenzo Romano had a new obsession. The restaurant manager who'd challenged him. The woman he visited like a supplicant instead of conquering like a king. Some said he'd gone soft. Others said it was a game, that he was playing a long con, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy her completely. But those who knew him best saw something different. They saw a man changing. 6 weeks after their dinner at his penthouse, Lorenzo invited Reina to accompany him to a charity gala. It's for children's hospitals, he explained over the phone. Rome's elite will be there. Politicians, businessmen, old families. The kind of people who keep the city running. Reina hesitated. Why do you want me there? Because I'm tired of attending these things alone, Lorenzo said simply. And because I want the world to see the woman who changed my perspective. Lorenzo, if I go with you to something like that, people will talk. Let them talk. They'll assume I'm your possession. Your trophy. They'll assume wrong, Lorenzo interrupted gently. And I'll make sure they know it. Reina pressed her fingers to her temple. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, being pulled into Lorenzo's world, losing her independence, becoming defined by her association with him. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, Lorenzo replied. The gala is Saturday night. Let me know by Friday. No pressure. No expectations. Just an invitation. He hung up before she could respond. Reina spent the next 3 days wrestling with the decision. Sophia noticed her distraction. What's bothering you? Reina looked up from the inventory spreadsheet she'd been staring at without really seeing. Lorenzo invited me to a charity gala. Sophia's eyebrows rose. The Mafia boss? He's more than that, Reina said automatically, then caught herself. When had she started defending him? Are you going? Sophia asked carefully. I don't know. Reina set down her pen. If I go, I'm making a public statement. I'm telling all of Rome that I'm associated with him. That could change everything, how people see me, how they treat my restaurant, my entire reputation. And if you don't go? Reina was quiet for a moment. Then I'm telling Lorenzo that I don't trust him enough to be seen with him. That I'm ashamed of whatever this is between us. Are you? Sophia asked. Ashamed. Reina thought about the man who'd sat across from her in his penthouse, stripped of armor and pretense. The man who texted her philosophical questions at midnight. The man who was trying, genuinely trying, to be better than his reputation. No, Reina said quietly. I'm not ashamed. I'm just afraid. Of him. Of losing myself. Sophia reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. Reina, you've never lost yourself to anything or anyone. You challenged a mafia boss to his face and survived. I don't think a charity gala is going to break you. Reina smiled despite herself. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You've just been too stubborn to notice. Friday morning, Reina texted Lorenzo, I'll go. But we need to establish boundaries first. His response came immediately, name them. 1. I'm not your date. I'm your guest. 2. You introduce me as Reina, not as my Reina, or anything possessive. 3. If anyone treats me like your property, you correct them immediately. 4. I leave when I want to leave, not when you decide it's time. 3 dots appeared, then, agreed. All of it. Thank you for saying yes. Then another message, a car will pick you up at 7. Wear whatever makes you feel powerful. Reina smiled at that last line. Whatever makes you feel powerful. Not whatever he wanted to see. Not whatever would impress others. Whatever made her feel like herself. Saturday evening arrived faster than Reina expected. She stood in front of her mirror, examining her reflection. She'd chosen a deep emerald dress, elegant but not ostentatious, form-fitting but not revealing. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek updo. Simple gold jewelry. Minimal makeup. She looked like herself. Polished. Confident. Uncompromising. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black car pulled up outside her apartment. Not a limousine, just an elegant sedan. The driver opened the door respectfully, and Reina slid inside. Lorenzo was already waiting in the back seat. He looked devastating in a tailored tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, a simple watch his only accessory. But when he saw her, his expression shifted into something unguarded, appreciation mixed with genuine admiration. You look incredible, he said quietly. Thank you. Reina smoothed her dress. You clean up well yourself. Lorenzo smiled. I want you to know, whatever happens tonight, you're in control. If you want to leave at any point, we leave. No questions asked. I'll hold you to that. Please do. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying them toward the Palazzo Colonna, one of Rome's most prestigious venues, a Renaissance palace that hosted only the most exclusive events. When they arrived, Reina understood immediately what she'd agreed to. The palazzo was ablaze with light, its ancient courtyard transformed into an elegant gala space. Rome's elite moved through the crowds in designer gowns and expensive suits. Politicians she recognized from the news. Businessmen whose names appeared in financial headlines. Old aristocratic families whose wealth predated the Italian Republic. And they were all staring at Lorenzo Romano. More specifically, they were staring at the woman on his arm. Lorenzo stepped out of the car first, then offered his hand to Reina, respectful, not possessive. She took it and emerged into the flickering lights of cameras and the weight of 100 watching eyes. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. That's her. The restaurant manager. The one who challenged him. Is she insane? Look at how he's looking at her. Lorenzo's hand settled lightly on the small of her back, protective but not controlling. He leaned in close enough to whisper, ignore them. You belong here more than half these people. Reina lifted her chin and walked forward, refusing to be intimidated by the stares. They moved through the crowd, Lorenzo making introductions. True to his word, he introduced her simply, this is Reina. She manages Bella Notte. Not my Reina. Not my companion. Just her name and her accomplishment. But the crowd understood anyway. The way Lorenzo stood near her, attentive but not possessive. The way he listened when she spoke. The way his entire focus shifted when she entered his orbit. This wasn't a business arrangement. This wasn't a transaction. This was something real. Halfway through the evening, a silver-haired politician approached with a calculated smile. Lorenzo, introduce me to your lovely companion. Senator Marconi, Lorenzo said coolly. This is Reina. The senator took her hand, his grip lasting just a second too long. Charming. Tell me, my dear, how does a restaurant manager catch the attention of Rome's most elusive bachelor? Reina smiled politely but pulled her hand back. By refusing to be caught. The senator blinked, momentarily thrown. Then he laughed, forced and uncomfortable. Spirited. I like that. He turned to Lorenzo. You've always had excellent taste in acquisitions. The air went cold. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Reina felt him tense beside her. Reina isn't an acquisition, Lorenzo said quietly, each word precise and sharp as a blade. She's a brilliant businesswoman who honors me with her presence. I'd suggest you show her the respect she deserves. The senator's smile faltered. Of course. I meant no offense. Then none was taken, Reina said smoothly. If you'll excuse us. She placed her hand on Lorenzo's arm and guided him away, feeling the coiled tension in his muscles. Thank you, she murmured once they were out of earshot. For correcting him. You shouldn't have to thank me for basic respect, Lorenzo said tightly. That man has always been a pompous. Lorenzo. Reina stopped walking and turned to face him. I'm fine. You handled it perfectly. Lorenzo took a slow breath, forcing himself to relax. I wanted to do more than correct him. I know. But you didn't. That's what matters. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, gratitude mixed with wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Dance with me, he said suddenly. Reina glanced toward the ballroom where couples moved across the floor in elegant waltzes. I don't really. Please. Lorenzo extended his hand. Not as a command. As a request. Reina looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, open, vulnerable, hopeful. She placed her hand in his. Lorenzo led her to the dance floor, his hand settling respectfully at her waist, the other clasping her hand gently. They began to move, and Reina was surprised to discover he was an excellent dancer, confident but not controlling, leading without forcing. You're full of surprises, she murmured. My mother insisted I learn, Lorenzo said. She believed a man should be as comfortable in a ballroom as a boardroom. Was she right? She usually was. They moved together in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. Reina was acutely aware of how close they were, of Lorenzo's hand warm against her back, of the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Reina, Lorenzo said quietly. I need to tell you something. What? Tonight isn't about showing you off. It's not about proving anything to these people. He paused. It's about showing you that I can exist in my world without letting it corrupt what we're building. That I can be Lorenzo Romano, the man they fear, and still treat you with the dignity and respect you deserve. Reina's throat tightened. Why does that matter so much to you? Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw past every defense, every carefully constructed wall. Because you matter to me, he said simply. More than my reputation. More than my pride. More than anything I've built. And I needed you to see that I can protect what matters without destroying it. The music swelled. The lights spun. And Reina realized with sudden terrifying clarity that she was falling for him. Not for Lorenzo Romano, the Mafia boss. Not for the power or the danger or the mystique. For Lorenzo. The man who cooked simple pasta. Who texted her philosophy questions. Who was learning how to be vulnerable. I see it, she whispered. Lorenzo pulled her slightly closer, just enough to close the distance, not enough to cross any boundaries. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For giving me the chance to prove it. The song ended, but they stood together for a moment longer, neither willing to break the connection. And around them, Rome's elite watched with fascination and disbelief. Because the most feared man in the city was standing in the center of a ballroom, holding a woman like she was made of glass and starlight. And everyone could see that something impossible had happened. Lorenzo Romano had fallen. Not through conquest or possession, but through surrender. The morning after the gala, Rome erupted. Photos from the event flooded social media and gossip columns. Lorenzo Romano and his mysterious companion. The Mafia boss and the restaurant manager. The dance that had stopped conversations mid-sentence. But it wasn't just the photos that had the city talking. It was what happened after. Reina woke to her phone vibrating incessantly. Messages from Sofia, from former colleagues, from customers, from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Did you really attend the Colonna Gala with Lorenzo Romano? Are you insane? You looked stunning. Is it true he threatened Senator Marconi for disrespecting you? Be careful, Reina. Men like him are dangerous. She scrolled through them all, her stomach knotting with each new notification. This was exactly what she'd feared, her life becoming public spectacle, her identity merging with Lorenzo's, her carefully guarded privacy shattered. Then a text came from Lorenzo. I know you're probably overwhelmed. Take the space you need. I'm here when you're ready. No demands. No expectations. Just patience. Reina set her phone down and stared at the ceiling. She'd known this would be complicated. She'd known getting close to Lorenzo meant inviting scrutiny. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing it viscerally were two entirely different things. Her phone rang. Sophia. Please tell me you're okay, Sophia said the moment Reina answered. I'm fine. Just processing. Reina, you're all over the news. Every major outlet is running stories about Lorenzo Romano's mystery woman. Some are calling you brave. Others are calling you reckless. And the underworld, Sophia's voice dropped. There are people who aren't happy about this. Reina sat up sharply. What do you mean? Lorenzo has enemies. Powerful ones. And now you're visible. You're a target. The words sent ice through Reina's veins. She'd been so focused on maintaining her independence, on setting boundaries with Lorenzo, that she hadn't fully considered the danger of being associated with him. What should I do? Reina asked quietly. I don't know, Sophia admitted. But Reina, maybe you should talk to him. Really talk. Because this isn't just about you and Lorenzo anymore. This is about your safety. Reina called Lorenzo an hour later. I need to see you, she said without preamble. Today. I'll come to you, Lorenzo replied immediately. No. Not Bella Notte. Not your penthouse. Somewhere neutral. There was a brief pause. There's a private garden. Villa Borghese. I'll text you the location. 1 hour. I'll be there. The garden was tucked away in a quiet corner of the villa's grounds, ancient stone paths winding through carefully manicured hedges, a small fountain trickling peacefully in the center. Private. Secluded. Safe. Lorenzo was already waiting when Reina arrived, dressed casually in dark slacks and a simple shirt. No guards visible, though she suspected they were nearby. He stood when he saw her, concern flickering across his face. Are you all right? No, Reina said honestly. I'm not. Lorenzo's expression tightened. Tell me what happened. Reina took a breath. Last night was beautiful. It was everything you promised it would be. You were respectful, careful, exactly what I needed you to be. But, Lorenzo prompted gently. But this morning I woke up to discover I'm now a public figure. My face is in newspapers. My name is being discussed in circles I've never been part of. And according to Sophia, I'm now a target for your enemies. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. I'll assign protection. No. Reina cut him off. That's not the solution. Don't you see? The moment you assign guards, the moment you start protecting me, I lose my independence. I become your responsibility instead of my own person. Reina, if you're in danger because of me. I need to know something, Reina interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. And I need complete honesty. No careful wording. No political answers. Just truth. Lorenzo met her gaze directly. Anything. Are you still the man Rome fears? Are you still Lorenzo Romano, the Mafia boss who destroys his enemies? Or have you actually changed? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. Both, he said. I'm still the man who controls territory, who makes decisions that affect people's lives, who operates in a world built on power and fear. I haven't abandoned my empire. I haven't become a saint. Reina's heart sank. But, Lorenzo continued, stepping closer, I'm also not the same man who threw a plate in your restaurant and expected you to cower. You've changed something fundamental in how I see power. How I use it. I still make hard decisions, but now I ask myself, would this make me worthy of Reina's respect? Would this be the action of a man who deserves her time? He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. You've become my moral compass. My accountability. The voice in my head that asks if there's a better way than violence and intimidation. That's a lot of responsibility to put on one person, Reina said quietly. I know. And that's not fair to you. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. But I don't know how else to do this. I've spent my entire life being one thing, the monster everyone expects. And now I'm trying to be something else, and I'm doing it badly because I've never had a model for what that looks like. Reina studied him carefully. She could see the struggle playing out across his face, the tension between who he'd been and who he was trying to become. I can't be your redemption, Reina said firmly. I won't carry the weight of your transformation. That has to come from you. I know. And I won't pretend you're not still dangerous. That you don't still operate in a world I fundamentally disagree with. I know that too. So where does that leave us? Reina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorenzo took a careful step closer, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that she might walk away. It leaves us here, he said quietly. Two people from completely different worlds, trying to figure out if there's a way to build something real despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. And if there isn't? Reina challenged. If your world and mine are too incompatible? Then we'll have tried. Lorenzo's voice was steady. And I'll let you go. No retaliation. No punishment. No destroyed businesses or silent threats. Just acceptance that some things, some people, are worth more than my pride. Reina felt tears prick her eyes. This was the moment she'd been both dreading and waiting for. The moment where she had to decide, really decide, if she could accept Lorenzo as he was. Not the idealized version she hoped he'd become. Not the monster everyone warned her about. But the complicated, flawed, trying man standing in front of her. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of losing myself. Of becoming defined by you. Of waking up one day and realizing I've compromised every principle I have. Then don't, Lorenzo said simply. Keep challenging me. Keep holding me accountable. Keep being exactly who you are, and I'll work every day to be worthy of standing beside you. Beside me? Reina repeated. Not in front of me? Not behind me? Beside you, Lorenzo confirmed. As equals. With you maintaining complete autonomy over your life, your business, your choices. Reina searched his face for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another power play. But all she saw was honesty. Raw, vulnerable, terrifying honesty. I need conditions, Reina said finally. Name them. First, you don't make decisions about my safety without consulting me. If there's a threat, you tell me. You don't just assign guards or move me somewhere safe without my consent. Agreed. Second, my business stays mine. You don't interfere, don't send help, don't use your influence unless I specifically ask. Agreed. Third, I need transparency. I don't need to know every detail of your operations, but I need to know when you're doing something that conflicts with my values. I need the choice to distance myself if necessary. Lorenzo hesitated on this one, and Reina appreciated his honesty in that pause. That's harder, he admitted. My world is complicated. There are things I do that you won't approve of. Things I can't always explain or justify. Then we might not work, Reina said simply. Because I won't be kept in the dark about who you really are. Lorenzo absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he nodded. Okay. Transparency. Within the limits of safety, yours and others, I'll tell you when I'm operating in ways that might conflict with your principles. And you'll have the freedom to make your own choices about our relationship based on that information. And you won't punish me for those choices? Never. Reina took a deep breath. Then I'm willing to try. But Lorenzo, the moment you lie to me, the moment you try to control me, the moment you use your power to manipulate our relationship, I'm gone. No second chances. No explanations. Just gone. Understood. Lorenzo's voice was solemn, certain. I won't waste this chance, Reina. I promise you that. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their agreement settling between them. Then Lorenzo did something that shocked her. He knelt. Right there in the garden, Lorenzo Romano, the most feared man in Italy, lowered himself to one knee in front of her. What are you doing? Reina whispered, her heart racing. Lorenzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But when he opened it, there were no diamonds. No ostentatious ring. Just a simple band, elegant, understated, made of white gold with a single small emerald. "This isn't a proposal," Lorenzo said clearly. "This is a promise." Reina's breath caught. "A promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you," Lorenzo continued. "That I will respect your autonomy, honor your boundaries, and never take your presence in my life for granted. That I will be honest, even when it's difficult. That I will choose growth over pride." He held up the ring. "If you accept this, you're not accepting me as I am. You're accepting the journey we're both on, the messy, complicated, uncertain process of two people trying to build something real against impossible odds." Reina stared at the ring, her mind racing. This was it. The moment of true choice. Not the choice to attend a gala or have dinner, but the choice to truly let Lorenzo Romano into her life. To accept all the complications and dangers and challenges that came with him. "And if I say no?" she asked quietly. "Then I'll stand up, walk away, and keep the promise I made, to let you live your life without interference. The protections stay. The respect remains. But I disappear from your personal life." Reina looked at Lorenzo's face, vulnerable, hopeful, terrified. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. The plate he'd thrown. The revenge he'd enacted. The way he'd slowly, painfully learned to ask instead of demand. To respect instead of control. He wasn't perfect. He might never be. But he was trying. And that, Reina realized, was worth something. She extended her hand. Lorenzo's expression shifted, relief and wonder and something that looked dangerously close to love. He slipped the ring onto her finger carefully, reverently. Then he stood, and Reina pulled him close, not in submission, but in partnership. "Don't make me regret this," she whispered against his chest. "I won't," Lorenzo murmured into her hair. "I swear to you, Reina, I won't." They stood together in the quiet garden, two people from impossible worlds, holding on to something fragile and precious and real. And for the first time since they'd met, neither of them was afraid. Because they'd both made a choice. Not to conquer or surrender, but to grow. 3 months later. Bella Notte had never been more successful. Reservations were booked months in advance. Food critics raved about the innovative menu. Business publications featured Reina as an example of independent success in a male-dominated industry. And through it all, Lorenzo kept his promises. He came to dinner twice a week, always respectful, always considerate, always treating her staff with the same dignity he showed her. He consulted her before making any decisions that might affect her life. He was honest about his world, even when that honesty was uncomfortable. And slowly, carefully, Reina let him closer. Not because she needed him. Not because she was dependent on his protection or influence. But because she chose him. Every single day, she made the active choice to keep him in her life. And every single day, he worked to deserve that choice. Rome watched with fascination as their relationship evolved. The fearsome mafia boss and the uncompromising restaurant manager. The man who'd never bent and the woman who refused to bow. Together, they were rewriting the rules. On a quiet Tuesday evening, after Bella Notte had closed, Reina and Lorenzo sat together in the empty dining hall. Wine glasses between them. Comfortable silence wrapping around them like a blanket. "I have something to tell you," Lorenzo said quietly. Reina looked up, immediately alert. "What?" "I'm stepping back from certain operations. The more violent aspects of my organization. I'm delegating them to people I trust, and I'm focusing on legitimate business ventures." Reina's heart leaped. "Lorenzo." "I'm not doing it for you," he interrupted gently. "Not entirely. I'm doing it because you made me ask a question I'd never asked before. What kind of man do I want to be?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "And the answer is, a man worthy of standing beside you. Not behind you. Not in front of you. Beside you. As an equal." Reina felt tears sting her eyes. "That's a huge change." "It is. And it won't be easy. There will be pushback, challenges, people who think I've gone soft." Lorenzo smiled slightly. "But I've discovered something interesting." "What?" The most powerful thing I've ever done wasn't conquering territory or destroying enemies. He squeezed her hand gently. It was earning the respect of a woman who refused to give it freely, who made me work for every moment of her time, who held me accountable when everyone else was too afraid. Reina smiled through her tears. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I prefer to think of it as growth. Lorenzo stood and moved around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. Dance with me. There's no music, Reina pointed out. We don't need music. They swayed together in the empty restaurant, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Reina rested her head against Lorenzo's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Thank you, Lorenzo murmured. For what? For refusing to kneel. For challenging me when everyone else bowed. For seeing the man I could be instead of just the monster I was. Reina pulled back to look at him. You did the hard part, Lorenzo. I just held up the mirror. You're the one who chose to change what you saw. Lorenzo cupped her face gently. Can I kiss you? Even now, after months together, he still asked. Still respected her autonomy. Still gave her the power to choose. Yes, Reina whispered. He kissed her slowly, tenderly, not claiming her, but honoring her. A kiss between equals. Between partners. Between two people who'd found something rare and precious in the most unlikely of circumstances. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. Not the way I've loved things before, possessively, obsessively, destructively. But in a way I've never experienced. With respect. With admiration. With gratitude for every moment you choose to give me. Reina's heart swelled. She'd been waiting for these words, but also afraid of them. Afraid they would come with expectations or demands. But they didn't. They came with freedom. I love you too, she said. The man you're becoming. The partner you've chosen to be. The equal standing beside me. Lorenzo smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile she'd learned to treasure. The queen who never knelt. And the king who learned to bow, Reina replied. They stood together in the quiet restaurant, two people who defied all expectations, who'd built something real from the ashes of violence and fear. And Rome, watching from the shadows, understood finally what had happened. The most dangerous man in Italy hadn't fallen because he was conquered. He fell because someone finally refused to kneel. And in refusing, she'd given him something more valuable than any empire. The chance to be human. The courage to be vulnerable. The freedom to choose love over power. 1 year later, Bella Notte expanded into a second location. Reina maintained complete ownership and control. Lorenzo provided silent financial backing, at her request, on her terms. He continued transforming his organization, gradually shifting from the shadows into legitimate business. It wasn't easy. There were attempts on his life. Challenges to his authority. Whispers that he'd been weakened by love. But he survived. Not because he was ruthless, but because he'd learned a different kind of strength. The strength to change. To grow. To choose integrity over intimidation. And through it all, Reina stood beside him, not as his possession, not as his salvation, but as his partner. His equal. His accountability. The woman who taught Lorenzo Romano that true power wasn't found in making people bow. It was found in earning the respect of someone brave enough to stand. Rome would never forget the night she challenged him. But more importantly, they'd never forget what happened after. When the most feared man in Italy knelt before the woman who refused to surrender. And proved that love, real, honest, chosen love, was stronger than any empire built on fear. If you want to see more powerful love stories that challenge expectations, subscribe to Undiluted Love Stories.